This is a message to parents and educators that you need to educate yourself, and you need to be a good supporter to your child or your student, and that mental health issues are really not a weakness, but they're just a symptom of everything else that's going on, and all the stressors that are going on.
Hi everyone, today we are here with two clinical trainers at Coolminds and Mind Hong Kong, Odile and Pinky, and today we're just going to be talking about being a clinical advisor, stress management, as well as some COVID related things about mental health, because obviously now in Hong Kong the COVID situation is worse, and I feel like lots of people are feeling the brunt of that mentally. And so just to get started, how is it over there? Because I'm in the UK, so it's like for me. So like how you've been working from home? I'm sure like that's not the best right now, but like how's all that?
So I work partially from home, partially I'm able to get out, which is nice. But yeah, it feels like we're going through COVID all over again, and a little bit frustrating kind of to see the rest of the world going back to normal. And we're still stuck in 2020.
Yeah. Because I'm in here in the UK and no one really wears a mask and everything is back to normal. So I guess like mental health wise, there's a good part where it's like, oh, you can go out and you can go see friends, but like also on the other side, it's like, oh, I might get COVID. That's kind of a stressor for me. But yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah, for sure. For sure. I know a lot of people are having a little bit of anxiety after kind of 2 years of telling everyone to wear masks, and all of a sudden saying like, yeah, it's okay. You don't have to wear it. It is a bit anxiety provoking.
So what do clinical advisors do? And if you would like to elaborate on that, how did you get into becoming clinical advisor and psychology and mental health and all that?
As a matter of fact, I am the content advisor of Mind Hong Kong, as well as Coolminds, because Coolminds actually is a youth program for Mind Hong Kong. So I worked with the clinical advisor group side by side, and my current work basically focuses on health education. So this is what I do. In addition to serving Mind Hong Kong, I'm also a part-time lecturer at the Hong Kong Baptist University and the Chinese University on sport and health related subjects.
So clinical advisors is a really kind of big umbrella role. And basically what it boils down to is, as a mental health organization, we want to make sure that all of the information that we put out there is evidence-based. So it's, backed by the latest research, and that we have, very much accurate information that we put out there. So that's what us as a group of clinical advisors, and we have a pretty broad spectrum group. There's myself, I'm a pediatric nurse practitioner. There's Pinky, who is a mental health educator. And then we have psychologists, psychiatrists, as well as counselors on the team. So it's a really broad group that is very well versed, both in education, healthcare in general, so like medical healthcare, so I'm a bit more on the medical side, and psychology, so therapy in particular. And so what we are tasked on doing is really kind of reading and checking everything that Mind puts out to make sure that it is accurate, and it is evidence-based. And then we also work on projects to produce different things. We work as trainers, and we also talk to the media if that comes up, as well, to give kind of expert opinions on certain things around mental health. The way I got into this, I actually moved to Hong Kong around the same time that we were setting up Mind. So it was just a bit, for me, it was a bit serendipitous. But the way I got into mental health was really through my work in the emergency department at the Hospital for Sick Children in Toronto. So I was never in the mental health field per se, but I was a critical care nurse in Toronto, and I saw that young people and children were coming in crisis into the emergency room, and the emergency room is like the worst place to come in, like when you're in crisis. We're very much medically focused, and it's a very busy place. It's a very loud place. It's not a very kind of cozy, nurturing, warm place to be in. And seeing sort of how we were handling mental health cases, I thought that there was a better way to do things. And so I kind of embarked on a fellowship and worked on best practice guidelines around how to manage crisis in the emergency department. And that's how I kind of got into mental health and started working on other projects within the hospital, all while kind of still working very much medically, both in the emergency department and inpatient pediatrics. And so that's how I kind of got into it. And then I moved to Hong Kong, and somebody I knew was setting up Mind, Dr. Lucy Lord, and got me kind of started. So I worked on our first conference, and from there just kind of snowballed. And at the beginning, I was mostly volunteering, and then we decided to kind of set up this like clinical advisor group, and I got added on to that. So that was my kind of convoluted way into this, and it's been really amazing to work with such a wide variety of professionals and people.
Yeah, that seems really interesting. Obviously I don't know about your story, so hearing that emergency care, you came from emergency care and then you came to a mental health organization, I feel like that's something not many people would do, so that's amazing. I know this wasn't listed in the questions, but just by hearing your story, and obviously I agree, psych wards and emergency medical care in mental health is not the best. So what do you think is a good way that hospitals and just medical care in general should take in helping people with mental health issues? And Pinky, if you want to pitch in, you can also join in to answer.
Sure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I mean, an ideal world. So I've had a very colorful background professionally, because the other thing that I also did in Canada was I'm a sexual assault nurse examiner as well. And so kind of seeing that trauma, and sometimes we had to see trauma, sexual assault and domestic violence trauma within the emergency department as well, because that's usually where everybody comes in. So I think really when it comes to mental health care, the best, and what I think I would always recommend, and a lot of us who are sort of in this profession recommend, is to beef up our community services, so that we can catch people earlier before it becomes a crisis, right, and deal with things far earlier than when it is a crisis, or even kind of deal with things as they're starting to become a crisis, but we can still manage it in the community. So having lots of services in the community so that we can try and avoid as much as possible the hospital. And then same with long-term care. I think that hospitals play a role, because there are parts to medical management, particularly with suicidality and eating disorders. But if we can kind of move people out of that clinical medical setting into something more homey, and have more of a community, that would be really really incredible, because the hospital is it serves a purpose, but from a mental health perspective, from a recovery perspective, I think it's a bit, it's a lot harder. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with what Odile has said, that actually for mental health care, I think we should focus that on the community resources, because hospital, definitely no one would like to approach a hospital when they have problems. So if we have more community services specializing on mental health, I think that would be helpful.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And of course,
And then also, yeah,
sorry.
go ahead.
Okay, giving them the information is also very important, because a lot of people in Hong Kong, they are not aware of the availability of our community resources. So that is important as well.
Yeah, no, for sure. And I think the other thing I would say, sort of adding to it, is really understanding the importance of social networks and social safety nets, and how that plays into mental health. Because yes, there's a biological aspect factor to mental health, but so much of our mental health is really impacted by our environment and really our social environment. So paying a lot more attention to social safety nets, thinking about the things that are uh, the social impacts of our health, right? So like the economy, making sure that people are financially kind of well, can make a living and can support themselves, and that parents can support their families and be there for their families. Things like food and housing, those are all of that is part of mental, has to be thought about when we're thinking about mental health care, not just medications or psychiatrists or psychologists. Like, we have to kind of think of as a holistic society, because so much of that impacts the way we feel. And there's and also kind of childhood trauma, and how do we support families, and how do we support parents to really support their children as well.
Yeah, I completely agree. Like, I've read so many things that are like your economic status or your like racial identity is also like a big part of like your mental health. And I completely agree that like it's a holistic thing, and society in general should hope to like end the stigma more. So Pinky, since you're like a Hong Konger and you were born and raised in Hong Kong, what do you think Hong Kong specifically as a society can do differently to like raise awareness and end the stigma for mental health?
Well, there are a lot of things that we can do. I think education is quite important, because in Hong Kong, a lot of people still have a lot of different rituals and taboos about mental health. So raising the awareness of mental health is important, as it would help clarify a lot of myths and misconceptions about mental health. Some misconceptions that I know of can be very misleading, such as people may think that, oh, well, people with mental health, they are very violent.
Mhm.
And they also think that mental health problems are forever and cannot be treated. So I think a lot of people in Hong Kong, they think mental health has nothing to do with them, and I'm not aware that mental health problems, as a matter of fact, affect all of us in reality. So that is the reason why Mind Hong Kong is committed to improving the awareness and understanding of mental health. Perhaps you may have heard of our anti-stigma campaign, More Than a Label. Odile is the lead of this campaign. Right. The campaign features real life mental health stories and recovery journeys, with the aim of lowering the stigma against those suffering from mental health conditions, and developing more accurate and positive attitudes towards mental health in our society. I personally really like that program because stigma, as a matter of fact, really affects how we think about mental health, and that also makes people fear about mental health. So I would say stigma often comes from a lack of understanding or fear. So it is very important as a first step to reduce the stigma towards mental health around us. And I think it is also important to increase the accessibility of related information. So provide opportunities for people to talk about mental health, to be closer to mental health. And as more people know about mental health, I think the people who are struggling with mental health would feel more comfortable to talk about their difficulties. And most importantly is to seek help. Do you know that only 26% of people experiencing mental health difficulties seek help in Hong Kong, and 60% did not know any other resources of support for mental health apart from hospitals. As Odile mentioned, I mean, hospital is not a good place for people to reach out when they have mental health problems. We should do more in our community, and that would help everyone, because hospital itself is not something that people would think of comfort, something that they would just go there and find someone to listen to them. So I think it's more a social cushion for them is more important. And Mind Hong Kong has done some research showing that the attitude to mental health problems and the awareness of mental health problems in Hong Kong is still a big concern. There is a high level of stigma, and there are still a lot of misconceptions about mental health conditions. And according to some of our own statistics, we find that 81% of respondents claim that they had not previously accessed any kind of mental health related information. And this is quite obvious that Mind Hong Kong, we can do more on this, or all of us can do more on this. We hope to be able to change the common perceptions or stereotypes through our campaign by sharing stories of resilience and recovery from our ambassadors and Hong Kong's mental health advocates. Since Odile is the lead, do you have anything that you want to add about our More Than a Label project?
Yeah. The stigma around mental health is really how I became really involved in Hong Kong, and the way More Than a Label and just our whole stigma project kind of came about was when we had our first conference in 2017. We had 2 days primarily for professionals, and we had a lot of kind of professional talks and things. But the final day, the third day, which was on a Sunday, was one that was open to the public. And part of the programming for that day was to have, I think it was like 5 individuals sit on a panel and talk about their mental health experiences. And so I was tasked with talking to them and helping them kind of craft their story and then think about their story and their messaging for the panel and prep them for the panel. And that's how we came about our work. And so what I've kind of learned over the past few years as we've developed the training into something a lot more formal, and now we've had geez, about 60 ambassadors kind of go through, and we're, just now completing our first Cantonese speaking training that was translated and kind of adapted from our English training, was that there is first of all, you kind of see how much resilience there is. I think mental health often is talked about in very negative, or I shouldn't say mental health, but mental ill health is talked about in very negative terms, about weakness, about lack of discipline. You hear that a lot, sort of particularly in sort of Asian language. And what you see when you talk to our ambassadors is the incredible amount of strength and resilience that they come with. And so that has been really heartening. And I think that really translates when they speak to the audience, and making sure that people understand. Pinky talked about the education. And I think particularly in places like Hong Kong, where there is a bit of a lack of just basic mental health knowledge, it's really important to educate. And then on top of that, it's really important to, show people, like show the faces of mental ill health and mental struggles, all of which are now in recovery, and showing people that, like, yes, recovery is possible. One of the big misconceptions is that, mental health problems are forever and they're not recoverable from. And one of the things we see is that, mental health recovery is actually very much possible and a reality for more than 80% of people who struggle with their mental health. Granted, recovery is sort of a loaded word, because recovery is all about, what you define recovery to be, and really what it's about is being engaged in your life. Whether you take medications, whether you are still attending therapy, or whether you're completely off medications, that piece really doesn't matter. It's about being engaged in your life and feeling fulfilled within your life. So, I think sharing these stories and seeing these stories of resilience and recovery is so important for Hong Kong to see what this is like, because I think up until now, like, mental ill health has been painted with just a stark brush, like just it's unrecoverable, you're not well, you're not productive, you're weak, all these kind of like negative tones, and then just showing that resilience and strength has been really fulfilling for me to kind of work with our ambassadors and work with our team.
Mm-hmm.
I think this stigma thing is especially quite difficult for men with mental illness or mental health problems, because they would be identified as someone very weak, not successful, very bad words. So that's why stigma itself is about disrespect. It's the use of different types of negative labels to identify a person with mental illnesses. And because of that, people also fear of stigma and the resulting discrimination. And that is the reason why when people have mental health problems, they dare not to reach out. Some of them, they dare not to share their problems with their families or even close friends. And in Hong Kong, there is a significant stigma surrounding mental health problems. And this makes it difficult for a lot of people to accept that, or their family members, especially for the older parents, to face any kind of mental health problems. So, and I think because of that, that also contributes to our social service or community services. A lot of time they are underfunded or underdeveloped. So it is hard.
Yeah, I completely agree. Like, I feel like in Hong Kong and just in East Asian societies in general, there's such a stigma that like mental illness is like something bad and something that's like oh, if you have it, that means you won't be able to be successful in life. And I've definitely like been through that. Like I've been diagnosed with depression, and I feel like lots of people are like, oh, you won't be able to like be productive, you won't be able to be, you know, a good student and all of that. And I think that's completely wrong. So do you have any tips for teenagers to deal with that, and as well as just like general like stress management and just general mental health tips for everyone? And as you said earlier, like lots of teenagers don't seek help. Do you have any advice on that front?
Well, for seeking help, I think more education, uh, raising the awareness about mental health would be very helpful. But when you manage about some prevention tips on stress management, I would say, like for myself, coming from an educational background on sport, health and physical education, I strongly recommend exercise and physical activities. When we feel anxious, our bodies release hormones like adrenaline. If you are often stressed, you probably producing high levels of these hormones, which can make you feel physically unwell and could affect your health in the longer term. In fact, Hong Kong, Inspiring Hong Kong Sports Foundation and Kelly Support Group, the three charities in Hong Kong, have joined hands to put together a workshop in an effort to help raise awareness of the importance of sports and physical activity in mental health. If you are interested to know more, we can give you more details later. And I think this kind of workshop would give people on various tips on how to take care of their own mental health. I personally enjoy outdoor and hiking. Spending time in the green space or bringing the nature into our daily activities can both benefit our mental as well as physical well-being. Like doing exercise outdoor or walking your dog, walking in parks, something that would help you to put the focus back to the present. So anything like drawing, mindful, finding things that you enjoy to see, to hear, to taste, to smell, to touch. I think all this would be very helpful. There are many things we can do in a green space, and all these things can have lots of positive effects. There have been a lot of studies or research talking about the positive impacts of the environment, of the green space on mental health. This would improve your mood, reduce feelings of or anger. Well, if you have time just to relax in the outdoor, this would be very helpful, especially on improving your confidence and self-esteem. And it also helped you to become more active, because a lot of time when people are struggling in mental health, they can feel very tired and don't want to do anything. So going out for a walk, just a simple walk can do. I mean, you can just walk around your neighborhood. That would allow you to inhale more oxygen, and that would help you feel a lot better. And I think there are a lot of advantages to stay outdoor or in the nature. I know some of my friends and people that I talk with, they find mindfulness very helpful. Mindfulness is the awareness that, I think you know it quite well, mindfulness meditation is the awareness that arises from paying attention on purpose in the present moment, non-judgmentally. It allows us to be with our experiences in the present moment with open-mindedness and acceptance. meditation and mindfulness are quite easy to practice and are able to help you improve your mood. Have you ever heard of the lazy 8, which we do this quite a bit in our regular training? As a matter of fact, if you go to YouTube, you would be able to find some demonstration on lazy 8. It is a very simple mindfulness exercise, which helps put you back into focus. When we are in emotional distress, we lose touch on what is going on around us. We probably would have a lot of distress, a lot of anger. So that's why this lazy 8 can be quite helpful. What you need to do is just to repeatedly draw on your palm, or sometimes just in the air, the symbol of infinity, or some people may say the number of 8, whilst maintaining your regular breathing. So you notice your breathing, say like inhale slowly, counting 1, 2, 3 seconds, something like that, and then exhale, doing it slowly whilst you are drawing the symbol of infinity. I mean, this kind of simple exercise can actually help you think clearly. It also has a kind of relaxing and calming effect, increase your attention span and balance your emotion. In some of our training, we also talk about setting realistic goals, because a lot of people, they have very high expectations of everything, especially in Hong Kong. We all want to be high achiever. Even though you don't set a high goal for yourself, but people around you set goals for you. Your parents, your teachers, things like that. So you have to realize or reset a goal that you feel comfortable with it, not fighting to get up to that point, because we are all different. We are human beings. So set realistic goals for yourself. Rest is very important. I think you also have heard that people with emotional distress, even though they are very tired, but they can't go to sleep because there are so many things going on inside them. So rest is very important. And drinking sufficient water, stay hydrated, eat well. Something is very important is check in with yourself. Treat yourself nicely, show compassion, not just on other, because I think it's just quite common when your friend approaches you, telling you some stories about themselves, some hardship on them. You probably would be very kind to them, listen to them, and try to be with them. And you can actually apply those techniques on yourself as well. But most importantly is to reach out for help if you need to. There is always someone around you who is willing to spend time with you and help out. You just don't notice that. So that's why we have to learn how to love ourselves, as well as learn how to reach out if needed. So another thing that I can think of, like dealing with stress is not that easy. But if we can learn a little bit more about helpful coping strategies, that would be very helpful. Do something that you enjoy. All of us are different. Some people may find listening to music, having a cup of coffee, talking with their friends, they may feel very relaxed. So I think we have to learn what helpful coping strategies would be able to help us to calm down. I'm sure that each one of us would be able to find some way that fits them. Another thing is perhaps you may consider the emotional resilience as well, because if you can develop some kind of special techniques on how to build up your resilience, that can be very helpful as well.
Yeah, I completely agree. Especially the fact that you were like, oh, treat yourself like you would treat your friends, because I think that's something that
Yes.
everyone do. We're always so harsh on
Yes.
ourselves, and we don't and we'll never say that to our friends. To our friends, we'll always be really kind, but never to ourselves.
There are a couple of movies that I've really enjoyed, and I think young people would really enjoy because they have a really nice and realistic portrayal of mental health and the messiness of mental health. But it is important to understand that if you are struggling, some of these movies might not be so fantastic because they can be triggering. So making sure that you are in a good place when you're watching these movies, because oftentimes they are dealing with things like suicidality and trauma and self-harm. So I'd kind of just put that kind of trigger warning out there. But a great movie is The Perks of Being a Wallflower. And I watched it on a plane. I shouldn't have watched it on a plane. It is quite an emotional movie. So kind of paying attention to that also. So kind of minding where you are in your state of mind. The other movie that I really like is what's it called? It's Kind of a Funny Story. I think it's on Netflix. But that's also a fantastic movie about trauma, depression, suicidality, and then All the Bright, and I'm hoping I'm getting the name of it right, but All the Bright Places is also a really, really, really beautiful movie. Also, I think on Netflix. And then the last one, Netflix seems to have had really great content around mental health, particularly lately. And then Atypical is a great movie. No, it's a show, sorry. Great show around neurodiversity, as well as just like, kind of growing up and all of like the adolescence, like angst. And then finally, sorry, total plug. So I'm from Toronto. So I just watched Turning Red. It's a Disney movie, it's an animated movie, but I think for the younger tweens out there, fabulous movie around sort of the changes and kind of what you go through as you're becoming an adolescent. So that's a fantastic movie as well, that has really kind of very realistic and very kind of honest portrayals of what we go through.
I watched Turning Red with friends, and I was crying during the credits, and it is quite an emotional movie, and I think it talks amazing about just generational trauma and how like mental health issues and how pressure from families, and especially since we're a Hong Kong organization, like especially how pressure in East Asian families can really affect people in like very effective ways of trying to break out of that.
Yeah, it really brings in that like the Asian culture bit. I know it's a Toronto movie, so if anybody is Canadian, especially if you're from Toronto, you might be homesick a little bit like I was. But yeah, it brings all of that in, and I think you can relate to it regardless. But yeah, it does have that sort of that Asian relatability, which is really nice.
Mm-hmm. So taking a sharp turn here, Odile, but as you're like you used to do nursing and you were also in emergency care, what were some of like your most challenging cases in the past, and like how did you solve it? How did you approach a suitable outcome, and how did that work?
So I'd say the most challenging cases that I've seen, and this, I think I will generalize this, but this is both in the emergency department, and then also when I became a nurse practitioner, which is a master's level program, and I had to do seen sort of both in like the youth, the high risk youth in a transgender clinic, as well as in the emergency department, the most difficult times were primarily when young people were struggling, but the parents were not supportive. And I can't say this enough. Young people, the most important factor for a young person to come out on the other side and be, in recovery in a good way, is one supportive adult. It is like the number one factor that is so incredibly important for the recovery of a young person from trauma, from mental health distress. And so I think when we had families that were not supportive, whether it was because of gender identity or because of issues around the stigma of mental health, and not wanting to, kind of not thinking that mental health was the issue, and that was, it was kind of character based, or like weakness, or like not enough discipline. That is what I found to be the most difficult. And then as far as kind of how do we deal with it, was, we try to be that supportive, adult for that young person. It's not ideal because we're not as close to them. We don't see them on a day-to-day basis, but we were trying to be that kind of cushion for them. And then at the same time, trying to bring the parents in and trying to make them understand and illustrate to them like how important their perspective was and how important their support was to their child's recovery. So that's why earlier I said, like, I wanted to kind of speak directly to the parents, because they are such a crucial, and teachers as well, because I mean, we're at school 5 days a week. Sometimes 6 days a week if you count sort of extracurriculars, right? So the adults in our kids' lives have to understand how important this is and have to be there as supporters, really.
Yeah, that completely relates to how just now we were talking about how mental health care is often really medical. So I'm really happy that you made it like a really nurturing environment. And I think that's definitely something that we should aspire to do. So obviously right now it's COVID times in Hong Kong. So a lot of people are like on their laptop all day doing school, like not 6 days a week, but like 7 days a week, because basically everything is online. You have assignments due every day. So how do you think COVID has changed people mental health wise, and like what do you guys know about the current situation regarding mental health during COVID and all that?
I think COVID has really impacted us in the sense that all of us were thrown into a really stressful situation. So nobody was spared. Of course, some people, there are gradations of stressful situations, and of course, if you're kind of lower as far as kind of socioeconomics, you might have a lot more stressors because you're worried about your jobs and not having access to like Wi-Fi or computers and things like that. And that doesn't compare to if your parents have jobs that they can work from home. But I think generally, globally, we were all kind of tossed into this incredibly stressful situation. And it highlighted to everybody how our environment and our situation and the stressors that we're under can actually impact our mental health. So we saw so many more companies, so many more schools reaching out saying like, "Ooh, we need more education on mental health. We need to talk about mental health." So that was really good, and I hope that we will take advantage of this increased awareness to really do something about it. So I really hope that at the end of COVID, we don't just like, COVID's over, masks are out, like we're done. Okay, no worries. We don't have to think about mental health anymore. We're cool. So yeah, I think, the awareness that it has brought, and understanding that like, oh, okay, so I could, have a hard time with my mental health when I'm under a lot of stress and I'm not sure about what's going to go happen with my school or what's happening with exams. And having that sort of collective understanding of how it can impact our day to day. I'm not focusing, having a hard time sleeping. So seeing those kind of impacts on a day-to-day basis, I think that has been unfortunately helpful, that we have all had to go through this kind of collective, I don't want to minimize the word trauma, but go through this collective distress period that, but I hope we don't squander this, this awareness. What do you think, Pinky?
Well, I think the anxiety spreads more rapidly than the COVID-19. The COVID-19 pandemic has disrupted our medical health services. And according to some studies, like I have read a research published in Washington, D.C. A study was done in the second half of 2021, and they identified that young people aged between 18 and 24 were one of the hardest hit groups. And throughout the pandemic, these young adults have developed a lot of anxiety, depressions, sleep disruptions, and even thoughts of suicide. And that raised the alarm that we have to pay more concern on younger adults, and we have to be more supportive. I totally agree with what Odile has mentioned about, because a lot of time, the help does not necessarily need to come from the medical health services. It is rather talking about the support from friends, family members, especially parents. So there are so many things that we can do within our social network or social cushion. And according to various studies, not just overseas, but the ones in Hong Kong, it also sets that the COVID-19, as a matter of fact, have increased the stress level of the younger groups. I remember there's one from, let me see, from Hong Kong Federation of Youth Groups, which was done in the end of 2020 on about 4,000 secondary school students, and more than 52% of pupils said that they have a very high stress level. If it is put on a 10-point scales, they said 7 to 10. And about 10%, they gave a straight 10 on the self-assessed index, which is quite terrible, I would say. So I hope that after the pandemic settles down, and I hope that we all learn from how to manage stress continuously, because during this time, it seems that a lot of people, they show different types of support. And I hope that this kind of support, especially those on mental health, would continue after the COVID-19 outbreak.
Yeah.
And during this process, I think especially at the beginning, because there has been a lot of people, they fear about being sent into quarantine, and they worried about the separation, especially separation from the young ones. I mean, the babies and the children. And there have been a lot of anxiety of decisions, whether to get the vaccinations or not. There have been a lot of misinformations, a lot of rumors, a lot of fake news. So so that's why by the time the outbreak has settles down a little bit, then I hope that we all learn on how to taking care of our mental health.
Yeah, and I really hope that sort of the adults in the room, again, really pay attention to these times, because I think your generation and young people right now, particularly in Hong Kong, I mean, we've been dealing with really high stress for much longer than COVID, right? Because right before COVID, we had the social unrest, which really, while it impacted the whole of society, there were quite a lot of impacts on young people. So, and you know, there are a few studies from Hong Kong U that reflect that. So I think there's a lot of repair that has to be done over the next couple of years to make sure that we really shore up supports for young people in Hong Kong in particular. And I really hope that the adults in the room really are listening and are paying attention, because I think that needs to be the focus, because you guys are the future generation of Hong Kong. And if we don't take care of you, then what's going to happen?
Right. Yeah, that sounds like a lot of pressure for society, but yeah, I do think that, like, obviously, yeah, we are the future, and I think not only society but also ourselves, we should really learn more, and like raising awareness about mental illnesses and just stress and mental health in general is really important. So what do you think that COVID and all of this collective like stress has taught both your personal patients and just you think society in general about mental health and self-care? Because obviously all of us have learned that COVID has been a really stressful time, and all of us have learned very specific self-care techniques. But what do you think that society as a whole and maybe your patients have learned about mental health in general? Because yeah, sorry.
I think we've learned, and what I have seen from both kind of my students and families that I've been in contact and helping manage, has been that we've also seen the level of resilience that we have, that we can get through this, which I think is really important. The amount of like reserves that we can see that, like, yes, I'm struggling at this moment, but I'm learning to take care of myself. So I'm doing, you know, like Pinky was saying, like whether it's exercise or engaging in things that you really love, chatting and like connecting with friends, even if it's virtually because we can't do it in person. So I think over the last couple of years, we've really added to like the arsenal of like coping strategies that we have. So I'm hoping that people will keep those coping strategies with them and continue on, and just see that, like, you know what, we're getting through it. I want to say we got through it, but we're in it right now in Hong Kong. So we're getting through it and we'll get on the other end. And, you know, obviously things are only going to be okay if we can continue on and we continue to shore up our resources and our social resources, and as well as our personal sort of strategies. But ultimately, you know, this will come to an end and we'll get on the other side of this. And we have an incredible, as human beings, we have an incredible amount of resiliency.
Yeah, although COVID-19 is a physical condition, the outbreak has had huge consequences for our well-being. And at this moment, we have to deal with a lot of worries about catching the virus, passing the virus on to our family members, all the different types of disruptions to our routine. And I think at this moment, self-care is important, rather than focusing on things that we can't control. Try to focus on those things that we can control and the people around us. I think we have to learn to be kind to ourselves. A good way is to check in with ourselves and ask us, has my mental health started to get in the way of my life? if this is the situation, we need to pay closer attention to our mental health and try to make use of some kind of helpful coping mechanisms in place. And during this time, I think we all need to learn to pay more attention to some of the warning signs of high stress level, trying to see if we are able to stop or control some of our worries. Have we been able to get on our routines or things that we have enjoyed? Is there any change in our sleeping quality, the energy level, eating, drinking, those kind of things? So a lot of people, if they are really stressful, they may turn to some kind of unhelpful coping strategies, something like drug abuse, drinking lots of alcohol, drinking lots of coffee, things like that. So I think we have to learn to pay attention to our warning signs and be kind to ourselves and try to take good care of ourselves. Mind Hong Kong has recently published a self-help guide, which is very useful. And I have read through it, and under each categories or under each heading, you will find some suggestion on what can I do. And throughout each of this session, you will be able to find some tips on how to take good care of yourselves. They also talk about how to write down some of your observation and how to plan on some of the things that you may want to try to manage your difficulties.
Okay. So I think that, like, as both of you said, like, COVID has taught us a lot about like taking care of ourselves, but what do you also think that COVID mentally has on us, like the long-term effects? Because while in this moment we're all very stressed, what do you think that this period will have for us in the future? What do you think that when we go back out, when there isn't COVID, will we all be more stress relieved, or will we be kind of having a lingering, like, kind of, not to diminish this, but like kind of lingering PTSD in a sense? What do you think?
I think we have to kind of pay attention to this because we were speaking about this just at the beginning before we kind of officially started. So just the example of the masks in many places where in the world where they're saying, okay, no more mask mandates. We've lived with masks for the past 2 years. And what we're seeing is, like, when people are saying, okay, you can take off the masks now, regulators are telling us that we can take off the masks. There is an anxiety that's linked to that because you're just thinking, oh, but you've told me to put on this mask. This mask is supposed to keep me safe. We have this like kind of like security blanket that now people are saying, okay, you can take it off. And what we have seen is younger children, because we frighten them so much about COVID, they are terrified taking off their masks. So we really have to think about how do we kind of slowly integrate sort of our lives back into sort of a new normal, the normalcy. And we have to also think about what are all of the deficits that have happened over the last couple of years. So one of the things that I'm really concerned about is the lack of socialization, right? We've socialized a lot online. And particularly for you guys, for young people, one of the major milestones for you guys is social contact, right? Like growing your friend group, learning how to interact with your friends, building friendships, learning how to collaborate together, and learning what are like healthy relationships are. And you haven't been able to really do that effectively for the past 2 years. And how is that going to impact how you kind of move yourself in the world? And so a lot of, we are going to see, and I think we're going to have to support a lot of young people who have some, varying degrees of social anxiety, kind of coming back into the classroom, talking, in public, seeing friends, being with other people. That could be a really high source of stress. So it's all of those things that have been taken away over the past 2 years. Yes, we want them to come back, but having those things come back can also be a source of anxiety, because we've been kind of locked away for a good period of time. So I think we have to think about, how do we progressively get back to normal? How do we kind of, get young people and children particularly to understand that we're gradually and almost kind of doing it on a gradual basis. Like, okay, well, maybe we'll take off the masks for a little bit of time, or we'll take the mask out when we're outside, just to get used to these things. So I think we have to think about all of those things that we're really excited about, taking off the masks, being together. We have to think about, like, are they also a source of anxiety now that they've been taken away from us? And how do we kind of gradually bring everybody back?
Yeah, as routines and activities begin to change again, back to the pre-COVID routines, I think we have to ensure that the change doesn't have to be come back right away. Make sure that we slow down and not jumping straight right back, because as Odile mentioned, it can be very stressful, and it may also cause anxiety with a new life again. So I think it is important for the younger people to take your time to think it through, to prioritize things, to take things happen step by step. And sometimes you may have to reset your lifestyle management, be flexible with your schedule, and sometimes don't be how would I say, don't be too excited, seeing everybody, and you try to pack your schedule. I would suggest that young people at the beginning especially don't try to plan too many social events together, because this can be very overwhelming. A lot of younger people, they just can't stand it because there are too many people to take care, and especially they want to hear everybody's story. They can be bombarded by a lot of people. So please ensure that prioritize the things that you need to do. No matter what you do, try to check in with yourself all the time, trying to be kind to yourself. And you don't have to return to normal by night. I mean, yeah, step by step, making sure that you feel safe, you feel comfortable. Take your time, and if you think that you are ready to build up your social network as if what you were doing pre-COVID, then you may always reach out to people, connect with others, talk to the people that you enjoy to talk to the people that support you. And Odile also mentioned about the support from parents. And I think it is also very important that the parents show their support to their children after the COVID has gone, because I think all of us, including the parents themselves, also need some time to return to the old days, if I may use the word. So I think that is important as well.
I agree. Because I'm back in London right now, so I feel like because here COVID's not that serious, people don't take it as serious. I feel like I also was one of those people who was like, I'm gonna go out with everyone, I'm going to make plans with everyone, and I feel like that definitely overwhelmed me, and I did end up having to cancel a lot of them because I was just feeling like I was putting myself out there too much. So I definitely think that's something you shouldn't do. So I think that's pretty much all that we have to talk about. Is there anything else you guys would like to talk about, especially in terms of like COVID and mental health and like reducing the harm of mental health COVID? Or if you have nothing, we can just wrap it up there.
I would like to say that because I know a lot of young people, they are feared of having negative emotions. And I just want to remind them that we are human beings, and negative emotions make us human. It is okay not to be okay. If there is anything they need help, try to reach out as far as they can and as fast as they can. I think talking to someone about their feelings, their thoughts, and their experiences often make them more tolerable. So talk to someone that they trust is very important. Of course, parents are definitely there to show their support. But if there is any emergency situation or immediate support is listed, try to check out the community resources. We have that in our Mind Hong Kong website.
Yeah, no, for sure. And we have lots of resources on Coolminds as well, particularly around COVID, both for parents and students. And I think my final thought would be like, let your panda out. The good emotions, the bad emotions, they're all really helpful for our own well-being, right? Because, if we're feeling sad because of a loss or a challenge, then that helps us build empathy, and we can be there for our friends when they need us. Feeling angry or frustrated, that can also move us into action. And things like what you were doing, Megan, with your organization, like those are like, those come from, being frustrated or being annoyed that, there isn't something out there. So let your panda out. And if you don't understand that, go watch Turning Red. I'm not making any money off of this movie.
I will check it out, Odile. I haven't.
Yeah,
it's on Disney Plus. Check it out. It's fantastic. So I would say just let your panda out.
Yeah. One more thing is that I think supporting the well-being of youth through preventive program is something that I would definitely like to see, because if more people are equipped with the knowledge of mental health, knowing how to cope with stress, knowing where to go in reaching out for different community support system, they won't need to reach to the point of crisis. None of us is perfect. So I just hope the young adults should be able to learn how to love yourselves and develop self-compassion. Try to avoid all those destructive thoughts and positive mindset. Something that I learned from my sharing with our ambassadors is to learn how to say no. We don't have to be a people pleaser, because I know a lot of stress, especially for younger people. They want to show others that they are able to please everyone. So we don't need to be a people pleaser. I mean, there are things that we can't control. Focus on those things that we can control, especially on our well-being and the well-being of people around you. And I think that is important.
Mm-hmm. I definitely agree. So at the end of this, I'm very happy that you guys were here. We're really, really excited to have you guys collab with us. And I think that I've learned a lot. And when this podcast comes out, I think people will learn a lot. So I think the main lessons is that we should all take care of our mental health and not be afraid to seek help, especially in Hong Kong where the stigma is so bad. So thank you guys so much for coming, and I think that's it for the podcast. So
sure.
Awesome. Yeah. Thank you. Thanks, Megan.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you for having us with you.
Yeah.
Yeah.